Today, 11th July, Monday, the year 2005, I am in the studio of Comrade Ajit Roy, the editor of Marxist Review magazine. Comrade Ajit Roy's history spans decades and covers various facets of the Indian political movement, pre-independent India, post-independent India, and the globalization period. His contribution has been unique in the sense that, being part of the left, he has come and reached out to those who were not in the left but who are making a contribution to mass consciousness. The left in India is right now at a big crossroads. And from the point of view of the history of Jharkhandi people, the left at one level had left out the indigenous people. And today, as the indigenous people are rising, they seem to leave out the left. This cannot go on. The indigenous people's struggle has to benefit from the history of the left, and the left has to benefit from what the indigenous people are demanding today. Ajit Roy, you were born 3 years after the Bolshevik Revolution.
Same year, 3 years.
3 years after the Bolshevik Revolution. You were born when in 1920, when the Congress party was coming up. You saw the Chinese Revolution, the Vietnam Revolution, the Cuban Revolution, the Indian bourgeois state taking over, and you are here standing in history at a very critical point. Can you tell us something of how you see your life from your young age, and why did you take up political activism?
I am not really introspective, so I can't give you self-analysis. I came into politics almost in natural course. My family has been connected with national movement from an earlier period. My cousin, he joined non-cooperation movement, then he became an activist of so-called terrorist party. He was in detention camp for 8 years.
His name?
Kitish Chandra Rai. And he always inspired us, the whole family, towards political involvement and freedom struggle. And my father was also quite keen on political movement, though he was a teacher, not active in politics, but he was always very keen on political development. So we picked up a few things from him also. And my sister, my eldest sister, who was also somewhat involved in political terrorist movement, she was, at that time when she was a school student, she was repeatedly asked to go over to the DIB, District Intelligence Branch Office. There was a British officer, Grasby, who was the superintendent. So my father had to accompany her to that office for regular cross-examination and investigation. So in a way, we were involved in a political climate and environment, so it came as a natural thing.
What was your age at that time?
Well, I went to prison when I was 13.
And where were you brought up? In which city?
It is a subdivisional town called Manikganj in the district of Dhaka.
And what brought you to left politics?
It also evolved in natural course because, Bengal was never really fond of Congress politics. It was either the old terrorist movement, and when about 10,000 young men were picked up for preventive detention in various detention camps, Deuli, Hisli, Bahrampur. They became, impregnated with Marxist movement and theory. So many of them returned from the jail convinced Marxist. And therefore, when I became politically aware, left politics came as a matter of course. Congress we ruled out. The bourgeois Congress and non-violence is not really going to deliver anything. So we always looked for alternative path and terrorism and through terrorism to communism.
Could you tell us something more about the or terrorism as a political strategy? Because today we are faced with situations where terrorism is considered the most targeted force today around the world. Without giving the reference of today, but if you could tell us the history of the terrorist movement of that time.
You see, Bengal was the cradle of so-called terrorist movement from 1905 onwards. At that time, Sri Aurobindo was the first initiator of this violent creed. He was arrested and imprisoned for a long period. And since then, various small groups became involved in terrorist activities. So it was a sort of mass proliferation of terrorist groups in different districts and all over. And one of them was a major one called Anushilan Samiti, a large one, and which later turned into the RSP in 30s, middle 30s, late 30s. They became, tuned to Marxism and became the Revolutionary Socialist Party. I became, acquainted with Marxism when I was an intermediate student in 1938. And I borrowed from the college library a big volume titled Handbook of Marxism, edited by Emil Barnes. It was about 1,000-page volume. It began with Communist Manifesto and ended with the program of the Communist International. In between, all the major classics of Marxist theories were either in full or excerpts. So I kept that volume with me for about a year, and I repeatedly read from cover to cover. Though I really can't say that I followed everything or understood everything, but I got a smattering of Marxist theory at that time, in that 38, before I became acquainted with any party or organization. So I was ripe for, recruitment by a political party. In fact, in my mind, I always pondered how I should get in touch with the underground party. Then, in my intermediate class, I had another fellow student, Nirmalendu Chatterjee, who was somewhat related with the Communist Party. He put me in touch with the Communist Party. And, it was in 1941 when I was in the university, first year class. I came in touch with the Communist Party, and I am proud to say the first day I got in touch with the Communist Party, I became practically a whole-timer. That was my main preoccupation. I didn't care about academic studies, and I went by the party's direction all through, and in course of a short period, I became an important functionary, because at that time, party being underground, its open forum was the Student Federation. So I became the secretary of the District Students Federation, which meant that I was the accredited representative of the public Communist Party.
Could you tell us something about the objective realities during that time, and what did communism have to offer that it became attractive to so many people?
First of all, you remember that was the depression period. So the petty bourgeoisie, the middle class, they were at the receiving end of the whole system. Large volume of unemployment, then, living itself was very difficult. So people were looking for some means of protest, some means of, achieving something to make their life easy. At that time, there was no shortage of quantities of food. But people didn't have money. In the textbook, in the economic textbook, it says the India suffers not from shortage of food, but not a famine of food, but famine of money, purchasing power. So you see, the main thing was this urge for a better life and greater freedom. It's not so much of economic problems, but we from the political periphery was looking for an alternative path to attain independence and freedom. We had become disillusioned about the Congress and its bourgeois leadership. So how to move forward towards freedom? That was our main consideration.
But then, why communism?
What was the
There was
alternative?
no alternative, or
There was no alternative because other small parties, the RSP had just come up and it had no credibility.
by RSP, the Revolutionary Socialist Party?
Yeah, it had just come up. During this period, leaders of the old Onushiran party, this old terrorist group who were in prison, became acquainted with some smattering of Marxism. They converted their party into Revolutionary Socialist Party. So you see, there was no alternative, and there was the Congress Socialist Party, in 1934. But, it was considered to be an adjunct of Congress itself. So not much of an alternative.
But were you all getting any information what was happening in the Soviet Union?
First of all, the Indian newspapers at that time, the daily newspapers, carried informative articles. Plenty of, much of the things I learned about Soviet Union was from the daily newspapers.
And these were British papers, English or Bengali?
Mainly in Indian-owned British paper, which was quite good, and sometimes also Bengali newspapers.
What about radio?
You see, at that time, radio was not a very common acquisition. We didn't have a radio at that time. And I don't know what sort of things came over to be broadcast.
We were at this of what information was available to the people in Bengal regarding the world global events, especially in the Soviet Union.
First of all, at that time, it was a period of Munich and, eve of the Second World War. And Calcutta newspapers, both English and Bengali, carried a lot of news about global development. Munich, then, Nazi advance, resistance. This was quite, available from the daily newspapers. Then, there was the National Front, the weekly organ of the Communist Party of India. It was only 4 anna a copy. So from my pocket money, I saved, it was quite a lot for me, monthly 1 rupee, but I saved that to subscribe to the National Front. So I got both theory and information from that paper. Then I borrowed books from library. I was always more or less an avid reader. So I was quite abreast with the development.
So you all were getting, in that sense that you were, you all had fairly good information on how the communism was faring in the Soviet Union.
No, I won't say that. I won't say that because we didn't get the negative side at all. Mm-hmm. What we got was sort of a, sort of...
the power of the working class.
Not that. How the people were improving their standard of living and, they were free from oppression of the landlords and capitalists. So all these major items, not in details. And that was enough for us.
What the communist movement at that time was, you would say there was a fervent And why did the communist movement not able to make a very strong presence in the...
No, you see, when I say it was empowerment, it was in relation to the national movement. It didn't take any position so much on the interest of the working class and toiling people. It was the more militant part of the national movement. That is what impressed us. So at that time, there were a few mass general strikes. You know, there was a general strike for a long period of jute workers in West Bengal. Then there was a major struggle of the Tata steel workers. And, you know, Hazra Singh, a Sikh worker, was crushed under a lorry carrying the black legs into the factory. So these were stirring events. So